No doubt by now you've seen this moment from Fox News Channel yesterday when the president of the American Federation of Teachers, Randi Weingarten, had a, well, let's just say, interesting exchange with Martha MacCallum. The short clip goes like this.
You have actually very difficult
Martha, sweetheart, listen to me.
Please don't call me sweetheart.
It actually does. I'm sorry. My bad. It actually does.
Let me tell you something. I'm a married man. I am not married to Martha MacCallum, but I am married to a very strong, opinionated blonde. And let me tell you something. When you get that face, you done stepped in it. When I don't know who Mr. MacCallum is. I don't know who Martha, but let me tell you, when hubby was watching this and saw that face, he had some PTSD right there. He said, "Oh, no, not that face." Oh, can you believe she did that? Sweetheart. Now, viewers of this channel, this program, will not be surprised that Randi Weingarten behaved that way. This is your typical Randi Weingarten moment.
Big businesses were hurting, and we helped them, and it didn't go to the Supreme Court to challenge it. All of a sudden, when it's about our students, they challenge it, the corporations challenge it, the student loan lenders challenge it. That is not right. That is not fair, and that is what we are fighting as well when we say cancel student debt.
Wow, that's Randi Weingarten. And may I just say, before we go into the longer version of this interview, despite what I'm about to say to you, Ms. Weingarten, I really did love your scene in the opening of Fellowship of the Ring. You were fantastic. All right, so this now is Randi Weingarten on her best behavior, with my just reining it. She's not hopping mad. She's not screaming, but she can't hold it in. I mean, I don't know if she didn't have enough Ritalin or what have you, but let's watch the whole thing, because there's a lot in here that goes well beyond just Randi calling Martha MacCallum sweetheart.
About protecting books of all kinds in Florida and other places across the board. So do you think twice when you listen to some of these examples of what's being read to 4 to 6-year-olds?
Mm-hmm. So, Martha, first off, thank you for having me on, and I hope that we get to all the other issues in terms of education. But I would say that this is a hard case, because parents, of course, have rights in terms of educating their kids, and schools have to be communities. And the moment you have a case like this with such great distrust for what is being taught in a classroom or read in a classroom, I consider that a failure from the beginning.
All right, let me just pause there. If you're not up to speed on the issue, this was a Supreme Court case that was heard yesterday. It comes out of Montgomery County, Maryland, which is right on the border of Washington, D.C., one of the most liberal areas on the planet. I used to live there when I worked in Washington, D.C. on a daily basis. A very liberal Democrat dominated. Jamie Raskin is the congressman from there, okay? You know what I'm talking about. Their school board decided that they would no longer allow parents to opt their children out of any curriculum that involved topics of a sexual nature. And the insidious thing is, it wasn't just, health, sex ed class. Like, they would have books for kindergartners that had same-sex relationships in reading class or English class. And of course, up until now, if the school decided to use material like that, because you can teach a kid to read without having the prince fall in love with the knight, right? But if you go out of your way and that's the book you choose to teach people, phonics, then parents have the right to opt their children out of that, because there are certain complex issues of sexuality and relationships that many parents would rather introduce to their children on their own and through the context of their own values, as well as their own religious faith. Well, the Montgomery County Board of Education said, no, go f yourselves with that. We know better about how to teach your kids. No more opt-out. Now, you just heard Randi Weingarten give you a really polished and rehearsed and market-tested answer, which is, well, if it's reached this point, there's already a failure somewhere along the line. Of course, parents have rights, so this is a really difficult case. Stop right there. If, of course, parents have rights, then this is a very simple case. There's nothing difficult about it at all. Of course, parents have rights, full stop. Parents have a right to determine whether sensitive, especially sexual issues, are discussed outside of their consent and outside of the parameters of their values. These are 5-year-olds. All right, so that's the topic at hand. Here goes Randi Weingarten trying to play to the Fox News audience and sound reasonable. But boy, does she reveal herself and the left pretty quickly. All right, take it away. What is she again? The president of the American Federation of Groomers? Is it? No, it's teachers. I'm sorry.
And I say this as someone who is a gay person who understands that we have to actually make sure that families are respected and families are safe and kids are safe and that differences are acknowledged and differences are embraced. But, once you get a case like this, where, parents are uncomfortable about what is being read to their kids in a classroom, this is something that has to be dealt with in a local level, not in the Supreme Court. And so parents have rights, and they should have rights in terms of what is being taught in classrooms. And, and we're going to have to actually deal with how we ensure that kids have a safe and welcoming environment, and that we see differences and we accept differences, whether those differences are religious or whether those differences are sexual, and that we actually make sure that the community is there as a community. So,
all right. So first of all, 5-year-olds don't have sexual differences because 5-year-olds are not sexual beings. So it freaks me out to hear somebody even use that term in this context. Okay. Number one. Number two, this should be settled on a local level. Well, okay. So I do a morning radio show in Washington, D.C. I've done so over a dozen years. I've covered this story. It's right in my backyard. This was handled at a local level. Parents spoke out. They showed up. They had their voices heard. They said, no, we don't want this. They were told to shut up and get out of the room. In fact, the vote was done without any public in the room at the time of the vote. Do you know why the Montgomery County public school system decided to end the parents' opt-out? Do you know why? Parents had the right to opt their children out and say, okay, if you're going to teach that, my kid has a right to leave the room, and you got to deal with him in another room. The reason why they ended the opt-out was because so many parents were opting their children out. It was chaos. Over half the classroom would have to leave. And then they had to have another teacher take care of the kids who were opting out into another classroom. And it became mayhem for the school system. And so the school system has a choice. It's like, all right, listen, we got this book. Half the kids are opting out. It's becoming chaos. So maybe we should pick a different book. Maybe we shouldn't use this book. Oh, now that would be a smart and reasonable thing. Wouldn't it, Randy? Is that the right way you handle it on a local level? Yeah, I would think so too. Oh, hell no. Oh, hell no. The teachers union, Randy, your pals, and the Montgomery County Board of Education decided, oh, yeah, this is a problem. This is untenable. We can't have this. So we're ending the opt-out. We're not going to force the kids to sit there against their parents' wishes because we know better how to raise these children than these parents do. And by the way, the reason why it ended up in the Supreme Court is because when asked to explain their position, these elected officials said, wow, these people are bringing their religion to the table. They're motivated. They don't want this book because of their religious faith. Some are Muslims, some are Christian, some are Orthodox Jewish, and they can't have that. They literally cited their religious beliefs as the reason why they were discriminating against them. It is going to go down in a blaze of glory. But I love watching Randi Weingarten attempt to defend this crap.
Though that there's an appropriate age to have a discussion. These are 4 to 6 year olds, and they're being read, and this is out loud in the classroom, not just, oh, this is a book on the shelf in the library. If there's a particular child that you might want to read this with, but just as an example, my pronouns are like the weather. They change depending on how I feel, and that's okay because they're my words. Sometimes I use all the pronouns I can think of, just as one example here.
Let me put it this way. Go ahead, Martha, and I think that this will be shocking to you. these would not be the books I would be reading as a classroom teacher to kids who are 4 to 6 years old.
Now, first of all, it should be pointed out that Randi Weingarten, president of the American Federation for Teachers, making all these decisions about your children, she doesn't have any kids of her own. That said, Randi Weingarten just admitted that if she were a parent, she would like to opt out if her kid had to hear these, because she just said, with my judgment, based on my sensibilities, based on my values, as a teacher, I wouldn't read that book. Okay, so you're saying you would opt out from reading it. How about letting parents opt their children out from hearing it? But she can't connect those dots. She can't use logic in that way. She's a liberal.
Yeah. And I say this, I went through the New York City public school system. I was a teacher during when we had the big issue around Heather Has Two Mommies. And I think when you don't actually make sure that things are age appropriate and we don't actually have sufficient conversations with teachers and parents in terms of how we accept differences, then you have situations like this right now. Yeah. And so my concern about this case is that it is, that it could pit people against each other, when what we really need to be doing is we need to be making sure that every one of God's children is accepted in our classrooms. And whether that person is an evangelical Christian, or whether that person is the daughter or the son of, gay parents, that is our obligation in schools. So, it's a failure of all of us that this case is in the Supreme Court right now.
No, it's not. It's a failure of the radical left. Do you notice the underlying message that she's sending there is that, well, this is about tolerance. This is about teaching children to be tolerant of people based on, whatever. So the underlying basis for her argument here, and the left's argument, is that parents are teaching their children to be bigots. And we, the public school teachers, we need to correct that. We need to fix that. Otherwise, they're all going to be a bunch of bigots. And there's this unspoken assumption that the left uses, personified by Randi Weingarten, that there's this ongoing intolerance and bigotry going on with 5-year-olds or 6-year-olds. You know what they're intolerant of? Cooties. For God's sake, what are you seeing that I don't see? I've had little kids. I see little kids all the time. I've got an idea, Randy. I've got an idea, progressive left. I've got an idea, Montgomery County School Board. If a kid in a class is bullying another kid, discipline that kid. That's it. But don't indoctrinate everybody under the guise of, well, there's got to be bullying, so we better read these books that sure seem like you're trying to recruit people to an ideology, or worse. What happened to the days of just isolating the kid who's misbehaving, calling in his parents, and dealing with it? Because here's the sad truth. There isn't any bullying going on. 5-year-olds are not attacking people over their sexuality, because 5-year-olds don't see sexuality. Only creepy adults see that sort of thing in 5-year-olds. All right, I'll let this run through because I've got I'm sorry, I could go out of my mind on a topic like this, but we have only so much time in our program.
So, it seems to me that the failure for all of us is what has happened to our kids in terms of their education. And I think what disturbs a lot of parents, religious background or non-religious background, is that they see this, woke ideology as, sort of the common phrase around all of this happening. And they're looking at the numbers and saying, why are you reading this book to my child when, first of all, I want to deal with this kind of discussion at home based on my own understanding of where my child might be. And B, the numbers are plummeting. Look at this. I mean, if this isn't a failure that needs to be so much more important than whether or not you're reading a book about your pronouns. This is the Maryland rankings. 4th graders, these same little kids who've had these books, fed to them at a very young age. Their reading ranked in 2013, they were 2nd in the nation in Maryland. 2024, 20th. Math, 16th in the nation, plummeting. down to 39th. So if I were a parent in this district, I would be saying, please, please leave these books out of the picture. Teach my child to read and to do math. Okay.
So, yes,
and let's focus
totally,
on let's focus on why we're there.
Can we focus on that? Which is like, let's focus on the kind of things that we should be doing for kids. Because if you actually, so this is not a district that I represent. It's represented ably by the NEA, and they've done a terrific job. But let's talk about the NAEP scores for a minute, not the Maryland Lake scores. Why don't you put up the
you have, I
Massachusetts
think, about
NAEP
18,000
scores.
teachers in the Maryland district at large. So.
No. But these are, so let's talk about the NAEP scores, for example, in Florida, which is like, you know, a lot of people look at Florida and say that is the king, that is the mother of all mothers of school choice. Their NAEP scores are the lowest. They really plummeted in the same way. Let's look at the NAEP scores in Massachusetts, which some people would say, probably on your, you know, in your on your network, that those, you know, that the Massachusetts scores or the Massachusetts schools are very much embedded in equality and diversity. So let's look at what happens in Massachusetts that really works and what happens in Florida that doesn't work. What happens in Massachusetts that works is that there is far more funding and there is a real culture of a safe and welcoming school.
Well,
and what we need to do is we need to actually do more of that.
So you're saying that because if we can find other areas around the country where the proficiency levels are also abysmal and should be embarrassing to any education organization, that we can start to make assessments and say that, oh, it's because of choice or it's because of money. We know that money does not equate a better outcome, because in Newark, New Jersey, you have a per capita expenditure that is one of the highest in the country. And you have very difficult
Martha, sweetheart, listen to me.
Please don't call me sweetheart.
It actually does. I'm sorry. My bad. It actually does matter. And in fact, some of the conservative folks who used to say that money doesn't matter actually have changed their mind. So the issue,
they wanted to go to different programs and choice programs and be able to give it to parents who want to homeschool their kids and provide.
No. I'm talking about people who are actually been looking at these numbers.
Yeah, she should have quit it, sweetheart, because it didn't go any better than that. Incredibly important and complex issue. It is not. It is actually very simple. Other people think that they're better at raising your children than you are. Other people think that they're smarter at raising their children than you are. Other people think that you're a terrible parent because of your values and your principles. And so they want to undermine you and teach your kids what they think your kids should be learning. Not about math, not about reading, not about science. No, about, stuff that they have no business talking to your kids about. And you're on the right side of this issue. Stay on that side. And the right side of the issue is to not call a very accomplished professional woman that you're talking to sweetheart, ever.